My name is Madam Rojo.
Hi everyone, I'm Ralph Duarte.
Hello, my name is Carlos Alvarado. On behalf of Ralph and Miriam and myself, this is Govern the Nonprofit MPA 593, week number 5.
Outline for today's presentation will be to provide a copy of our organization's articles of incorporation, provide a copy of the IRS determination letter, provide a copy of our 990 forms, identify one or more areas where our organization may be at risk of a UBIT, identify one or more areas where our organization may have an issue related to gaming, identify one or more areas where our organization may have an issue related to lobbying, identify one or more areas where our organization may have an issue related to political campaign activities. Identify one or more areas where our organization may need to provide information on what constitutes as charitable deduction.
The Articles of Incorporation are very important to the nonprofit. They are going to explain to the members and to the public specifically what the goal of the Articles of Incorporation or specifically what the organization is about. In this case, the primary purpose of the Regional Access Project Foundation is to enhance and facilitate mental health and juvenile services in Eastern Riverside County. So it's really important for board members to recognize that the Articles of Incorporation are essentially a constitution for the Regional Access Project. And it's going to explain to them in the Articles of Incorporation certain specific information that's important to the foundation. And that would be how to spend money, right? And how the organization is going to be organized and where it should be located and what should happen if there's a dissolution amongst the RAP Foundation. Carrying over to the bylaws, where the Articles of Incorporation are more regarded as a constitution, you can look at the bylaws as more of amendments to that. And they're going to explain in a little bit more in detail what the nonprofit can and what it cannot do. It provides guidance to the officers, to the members, to the public. The Regional Access Project has had a considerable amount of amendments to their bylaws, um, and it's very important for board members to be aware of these articles. In the bylaws for the Regional Access Project, there's actually 7 articles, but they're important to know because it explains to them what their duties are, what the responsibilities of the organizations are, and how to stay in compliance in order to achieve their goal of providing mental health and juvenile services to the Eastern Riverside County. Board members should be made aware that the IRS determination letter is an important piece of document. And the reason it's important is because it provides legitimacy to the non-for-profit organization that's issued by the Internal Revenue Service. It tells board members that the application and the documents that were received by the IRS have met the requirements by the IRS to issue them an exempt status. So this is important moving forward. Also, what's highlighted here is the employee identification number. That number will be important because it helps the nonprofit organization establish reporting requirements for the IRS, and also it helps them establish a bank account moving forward for the Form 990 is also really important for the non-for-profit because it provides all the information that the IRS requires in order for them to be in compliance. So the Form 990 will give you essentially a breakdown of contributions, investments, essentially total revenue that's being put into the nonprofit, and also explains salaries of the employees, any grants, and also total expenses for the nonprofit itself. Certain organizations might be required to file additional forms on top of the 990, depending on what type of contributions or what type of activities that the nonprofit was involved in. But it's important that the organization have a Form 990 and they are filing these every year in order to continue to stay in compliance. Board members must understand that nonprofit organizations are required to file certain information in order to remain in compliance. So they have reporting requirements. These reporting requirements can be tax forms. Certain tax information must be provided during specified periods. Also, board members need to know that there are articles of incorporation which must be followed. Bylaws must be followed. And if there are practices that are not in compliance with the organization's articles of incorporation and bylaws, essentially it could cost the nonprofit their status. So it's important that the board members recognize this and they are assisting the nonprofit in order to remain in compliance moving forward.
An area where the Regional Access Project Foundation or any other nonprofit organization could be at risk of unrelated business income tax can be in areas, and an example is an area of the parking lot. The example of the parking lot we could use is if the Regional Access Project Foundation or any other nonprofit organization decides to charge a fee for member parking or visitor parking while they're attending the organization's activities, those can be exempt from UBIT, which stands for Unrelated Business Income Tax. Where the Regional Access Project Foundation or any other nonprofit organization could be at risk is when they use the parking lot for general public parking and they collect a fee. That fee will now be considered unrelated business income tax and needs to be reported. If an organization has questions on if they're at risk for unrelated business income tax, they can also look into the IRS publication 598 and on tax on unrelated business income of exempt organizations. Some of the types of charitable games are bingo, slot machines, poker, raffle, keno. Those are just to name a few. One risk of charitable gaming is that the games that are being played must be lawful in the state where the organization conducts business. Another risk is that some charitable games may need uh, special filing requirements and might be required some special excessive taxes in order to be played, but also every game has different reporting measures. As previously mentioned, each game has different reporting requirements. For example, raffle winnings must be reported if the winning is $600 or more and is 300 times the amount of the wager. If the Regional Access Project Foundation or any other nonprofit organization would like further details about tax exemption organization and gaming, they can look at IRS publication 3079.
Related to lobbying. Under substantial part test, no organization may qualify for Section 501c3 status if substantial part of the activity is attempting to actually influence legislation or, in this case, lobbying. Some organizations may engage in lobbying, but actually too much lobbying activity can put at risk the tax-exempt status for the organization. IRS considers a variety of factors, including the time devoted by both compensated and volunteer workers and the expenditures devoted by the organization to the activity when determining whether the lobbying activity is actually substantial. Under the substantial part test, an organization can conduct excessive lobbying in any taxable year, but they may lose their tax exempt status. therefore resulting in all of its income being subject to tax. Additionally, under Section 501c3, organizations that lose their tax-exempt status due to excessive lobbying are subject to an excessive tax equal to 5% of their lobbying expenditures for the year in which they cease to qualify for exemption. Now, expenditure test allows an organization may be elected to expenditures test under Section 501H as an alternative method for measuring lobbying activity. Under the expenditure test, the extent of an organization's lobbying activity will actually not jeopardize their tax-exempt status provided by its expenditures related to such activity and does not normally exceed an amount of $1 million. Issues related to political campaign activities. Under the Internal Revenue Code, organizations are absolutely prohibited from directly or indirectly participating or even intervening in any political campaign on behalf or in opposition to any candidate for elective public office. Contributions to political campaign funds or public statements of opposition, whether they're verbal or written, made on behalf of the organization in favor or in opposition to any candidate for public office, clearly violate that prohibition against political campaign activity. Violating this provision may result in either denial or revocation of tax-exempt status and the imposition of certain excess taxes. Charitable donations. When the organization may need to provide information on what constitutes as charitable deduction. A charitable organization must provide a written disclosure statement to donors of a quid pro quo contribution in excess to $75. Now, a quid pro quo contribution is a payment made to the charity by a donor, partly as a contribution and partly for goods or services provided to the donor by the charity. Now, there's two applications to charitable donations. One, to inform the donor that the amount of the contribution that is deductible for federal income purposes is limited to the excess of any money, and that the value of any property other than the money can be a contribution to the donor over the value of goods or services provided by the charity. Two, provide the donor with a good faith estimate of the value of the goods or services that the donor has received by the organization or the charity. Now, the charity must furnish the statement in connection with either the solicitation or any receipt of quid pro quo contribution. If the disclosure statement is furnished in connection with a particular solicitation, then it is not necessary for the organization to provide another statement when the associated contribution is actually received.
For future reference from the IRS, or if you need a copy of the handouts that were given to you, you may go to www.stayexempt.irs.gov. On behalf of Miriam, Ralph, and myself, we would like to say thank you for watching and have a great rest of your week.